Hello, welcome to Furious Driving, and today I am at the wheel of a car you probably haven't seen before. You might be aware of it, but I'd be amazed if you've seen one, more amazed if you've sat in one. This is a Talbot Tagora, the only one in the UK still on the road. So I'm very lucky to be driving it today. Now, if you like reviews of interesting and unusual vehicles, make sure you smash that like and definitely hit that subscribe button. Now, let's get on with driving this car. Proud to be sponsored by Diamond Bright, the car care products that have been keeping the Furious fleet looking their best for a long time already. To find all you need to keep your car clean and protected, follow the link below to diamondbright.co.uk. Hello, welcome to Furious Driving, and as you know on this channel we love a rarity, an oddity, a unicorn, something that you're not going to find anywhere else. And today I think we've done it again with this, a Talbot Tagora. When was the last time you saw one of these? Well, unless you happen to own one of the other 8 that are currently off the road, it was a long time ago, because until this one recently went back on the road there were 0 gracing the UK's streets. But this one has just been put back and it's rather nice, isn't it? Let's take a look around. So before we talk about the car, let's have a quick backtrack into who Talbot themselves were, who made the thing. Well, Talbot was one of the great legacy names of the early years of motoring. They were real fine quality cars. However, by the 1970s, they'd been bought by Chrysler Europe, and Chrysler Europe's operations were pretty much hemorrhaging money at an alarming rate. Meanwhile, in 1976, Peugeot had absorbed Citroën to become PSA Group. And in 1978, they made an offer to buy Chrysler's European holdings and acquired Talbot. Also in the meantime, Talbot had been developing a new executive car to rival things like the Granada, the Rover SD1, the Peugeot 505, the Citroën CX and the Volvo 200 series. And it was virtually off the drawing board by the time that merger happened. That car was destined to become this, the Tagora. Of course, it was called the C9 at that point. Now, being an Anglo-French development, it was an interesting concept how they put it together. Underpinnings, mechanical side, was all developed in France, but the design happened in Coventry. I believe Roy Axe was actually the man responsible, and you can see the square edges and this nice swage line, which are kind of his trademarks. Other styling points from this incredibly angular car, which make a Volvo 740 look curvaceous, are these amazing alloy wheels, these 4 multi-spoked items, which have actually got Michelin TRX metric tyres, which are not the easiest thing to find. And if you're a fan of 1980s goodness, then pop-up headlights and wipers are a thing of joy. But check out the size of these things, they are monumental. Now, mechanically, this thing is very interesting. It was so close to being signed off when Peugeot took over the Talbot Group. All the big decisions had been made. However, in the interest of cost saving and the fact that the 505 and the CX were going to be rivals, they decided to make a few minor differences. For example, it no longer has the originally intended rear axle. It's now got the slightly narrower Peugeot 505 rear axle, which saved a lot of money, and instead of the expensive front double wishbones, it's now got McPherson struts. There were 3 engine choices here under the bonnet, the most basic being the 2.2 litre Type 180 engine, which is a development and enlargement of the previous Talbot engine. Now, although related by ownership, this is not the Chrysler K-Series 2.2 or the Duvrin 2.2, so don't get that confused. With a single Solex carburetor, that made 115 horsepower and 184 Newton meters of torque. If you wanted something a little different, there was also a diesel version of this thing. That was the 2.3 litre XD unit, making 80 horsepower and 184 Newton meters of torque. Those are the more basic levels of car. The 2.2 petrol was only available as a GL or a GLS with a 4-speed manual and an optional power steering. If you wanted more luxury, you had to go for this, the Duvrin PRV V6, the 2664 or 2.7, although badged as 2.6 litre V6, which found its way into Peugeots, Volvos, the DeLorean and many other things. This was only available in the SX trim level, the top of the line thing, but unlike the rest of the users of this car, it didn't have fuel injection. It had twin Webers, which made it the most powerful and in fact the fastest accelerating production car on the market anywhere at the time. Unusually for a big executive car though, it wasn't available with an automatic at all. There was an option to tick, but apparently it was never actually produced, and as only 1,083 of these V6 powered cars were built in total, it's likely it was never fully developed. One curiosity to modernise is the fact that the coolant expansion tank down here is actually made of glass, not plastic, but glass. Right, let's take a look around the interior of this thing, which I'm fascinated to see. Now we have got, interesting door handles, which are solid chrome or stainless piece with a squeezable thing inside. The other day I was driving a Naylor TF which had these door handles, and I was trying to work out what they were from. I think I've just worked it out. Okay, this is obviously heading for the executive market, taking on nice cars like Granadas and Rover SD1s and so forth. So the interior is incredibly plush, and despite being designed in Britain, it does have an amazingly French feel, and the smell is incredibly sweet actually. It's got a soft, gentle, dry but sweet musky smell, which is obviously the fabric and the stuffing and so forth. Starting over here on the door card, there's a lot going on. It's nicely put together, and nice colour combinations. We've got the pale grey at the top and centre, a darker grey in this strip here which holds the big door handle, electric front windows, and we've got a big speaker and carpet down here. This is fully exec spec, and we have a nice door pocket as well. Even have adjustable door mirrors on this little nodule here. Moving in, take a look at these seats. These are so very, very French. Huge plush padded velour things. Velour is the most wonderful thing you'll ever come across. That big checker pattern is just absolutely fabulous, and you can see how comfortable they're going to be. You can smell how comfortable they're going to be. And you climb in and they are everything you hoped they would be. Climb in, it's a very flat floor, and you sink a long way. It's almost sports car like how far you sit down. These are adjustable. There is a pull-out lever to pump the height if you want it, but I'm stunned how low down I'm sitting here right now. Interestingly, we have got a big one-spoke steering wheel with a Talbot logo here in the centre. It does look very cool. Think of big Citroens and you'll be heavily reminded of this. Now let's have a look at the dashboard. The T-shelf is very interesting, not like something I've seen in a long time. First of all, up the top we've got big vents blowing the windscreen. Then we've got a big drop off, a cliff face of grey elephant hide plastic, which comes down to a nice tea shelf. There's lots of room for Anglo-French snackage along here. So small cups of tea, tiny aperitifs, digestive biscuits and digestif to drink. So yes, everything can be catered for in this nice area here, which has a little lip, so if you spill your tea or your coffee, it's not going to run onto your knees, which is very well thought out. And the design as a whole is very clever in its simplicity, because we've got this nice big darker coloured stripe which runs along the entire width of the car, looking very cohesive, very elegant. It's great design here, and these little box out areas of black plastic to contain other stuff. So air vents. In here we've got the ordinateur de bord, the onboard trip computer, fantastic, with these oh my gosh, well 1970s really, little square black, white and red plastic buttons and sliders up and down. It's a bit like a Hammond organ that you might have seen in your grandparents' house that they bought back in the early 70s really. But in the little trip computer here in the dashboard, absolutely fantastic. Over to the right hand side we've got a big panel of warning lights and these big square lights. The graphics are fantastic, and a test button down the bottom, well, to test them with. These graphics are so big and clear, it's amazing. Then moving over to the actual binnacle itself, we've got the twin main dials here in the centre. It's a little bit busy actually. It's quite interesting how we have a panel with the font and the writing for the speed and the rev counter and the item displays, and then the actual dials themselves are backed up about 1 centimetre behind. Redlining at 6.1, 6.2, top speed listed as 120, and a lovely green uniform row of warning lights up at the top as well, and temperature, oil, battery and fuel over there. And on the right hand side, looking very much like a Rover SD1, but actually taken from things like the Alpine, we've got our other bank of minor controls: fog lights, rear screen heater and hazard lights. On the binnacle we've got our wipers here on the right, very tiny little slim stalks, and on the left hand side a separate stalk for the indicators, flashing neatly, and for the lights, and push for the horn. Wow! A dramatic parp, excessively parpy, we love that. Moving back down into the centre, we have got our infotainment, heating and ventilation. First of all, the radio, a Hamburg by Blaupunkt. Quite a basic looking stereo for such a, well, high end in the marketplace car. And bear in mind this is the V6, not the 2.2 petrol, so it really should have been something a bit more special, but Blaupunkt are very high end, so I don't know, maybe this is specified by the first buyer, who knows. It certainly looks period correct. Then we've got our 12 volt socket lighter. This lighter has never been used, which is good. Something you might not be expecting to find in a 1980s exec car is this, the choke. And I've also never seen a choke which actually looks quite like this before. A slider rather than a pull. Fascinating. On the right of all that, we've got our heating and ventilation controls, another big slider for hot and cold, and push buttons to decide where things go with the air. Interestingly, the only real complaint this car got from every reviewer at the time was the ventilation. They were upset they couldn't have separate cold air from the centre vents blowing at your face when you had warm air on your feet, which is a slightly small complaint, but it really upset them back in the 80s. Another sliding switch with little notches for the fan, and then next to that we've got more electric window switches, which are presumably for the rear, a lockout for those same switches, so the rear seat passengers can't lean forward and push them. Then we have a 5-speed manual gearbox, which I'm sure I'm going to enjoy, but I'm, as I say, surprised the automatic option wasn't really a thing. It was there in name only. Behind that, ashtray, again never been used for anything apart from sweet wrappers. A lot of black plastic down here. Big handbrake, which when you're released goes flush into the centre console, which is nice. Then we have a little roller here for presumably ventilation in the back. A second lighter for rear seat smokers. This looks like it might be an ashtray, but it's not an ashtray, it's just literally a tray. And here is the actual pull-out ashtray. The seat is astonishingly comfortable and the headroom is amazing. There's no sunroof in this particular car, but we do have 3, count them watch, 4 little lights. A courtesy light here, a reading light for the passenger, and then a pair of individual courtesy lights in the back. Let's have a look in the back and see what it's like back there. Right, climbing into the back, huge square opening, so ideal for if you're being chauffeured, you can climb in easily while your man is in the front, taking care of the driving business. Wow, these seats are so comfortable. I suspect this rear seat has never been sat in before today. It is amazing. Lots of footroom, lots of knee room. The smell just takes me back to the 1980s. It's amazing. This bench seat is an absolute sofa. There is a large armrest, folds down there for comfort. We've got nice elastic velour-y pockets. We've got our little lights and grab handles. We have electric windows in the doors. This is all the 1980s executive luxury stuff you would expect, but with the addition of excessive comfort, like proper comfort. We've also got loudspeakers in the boot. You might think like a 1970s car you need to use the key, but that's actually for locking it. There's a little handle underneath there, so in we go. Okay, the car cover isn't here. Push that aside and you can see it's a very commodious space. Lots of room in here, slight wheel well intrusion, but not much, and it's carpeted. It's lovely. Again, everything you'd expect for a 1980s executive car. Let's get going in the Tagora. A little bit of choke just there. Lovely. Let's turn the fan down a smidge. Well, this is off position in that case then. Right, let's get going and see what this V6 luxury thing is like. Now this particular car has had an interesting life. It was bought brand new in 1983 and went straight into a private collection, which I'm not entirely sure whether it was a museum open to the public or just an extensive large collection in the Midlands. But after the best part of 20 years, it was sold, having done virtually 0 miles, to someone who used it for a couple of years and put 30,000 miles on it. Now, since then, the current owner, who is a prolific Talbot collector and restorer, has put the car back on the road after a little while of not being sure what to do with it, as parts are not easy to get hold of. He had it shipped to France, where someone who has restored one of these before and knew where to find the bits was able to procure everything and find what he needed. Now this is a very interesting driving experience. If you're used to your Granadas, your big Peugeot 505s, big Citroens, it has elements of all of those things in there. It's not 100% the same though. It is very soft. In a very French way, it is very soft. The big spongy seats, the quite softly sprung suspension is very nice indeed. But perhaps because it has the slightly narrow track axle of the 505 and a wider body, it has a little feeling of rockiness. Maybe I'm looking for that because I know it's there. But it is very light to drive. The steering is feather light to touch. And if you're used to French cars, you'll be used to extremely good brakes, which are present here, thankfully. The V6 engine kind of doesn't sound how I was expecting it to sound. It has almost a sewing machine-like rasp to it. Very interesting noise. But it does pull very willingly indeed, as you'd expect from quite a lot of horsepower. The gearbox is another curious thing. 5-speed manual, so well spec'd for the time, although not an automatic as you might expect. But surprisingly notchy. It's a lightish throw, but surprisingly notchy. And up into 5th, and we're away. The visibility out of here is just phenomenal. I mean, the glass house is huge. These low edges to the door shoulder line, great big windscreen, thin A-post. You may as well be in an open-top car. I feel like I'm driving the Hustler almost. It's so much glass area around me. But even on the inside, the sharp edges, the angles are still very, very present indeed. You are totally aware of everything, having a very square edge to it. But the design is beautiful in a 1980s clean way. I really do like it. It's such a shame it didn't take off. And that is the problem with this car. They sold almost none, and, well, virtually none survive now. It was regarded by the reviewers who drove it initially as a good car. They all had good things to say about it and commented on various aspects of its driving ability, its personality as a car, all that kind of thing. But the problem was they all agreed there was nothing that stood out head and shoulders above any of the competition. It didn't feel more sporty than an SD1, it didn't feel more comfortable than a 505, it was just good at everything but didn't excel in any one area, so it never really had a big USP that would make people go, yeah, I'm going to get a Tagora because of ... Which is a shame. Now, when they'd been planning the car, they'd estimated they could take 5% of the European executive car market and sell around 60,000 units a year, which is not vast in terms of motor production, but at the same time, not tiny either. However, things did not go to plan, and less than 20,000 of these were built at all, ever. In the first 15 months, 16,167, I believe, were produced. That is a tiny amount. And in the following year or so, 80% less were produced. And although the production started in 1981, the plug was pulled in 1983, and that was that. Now, to put those sales figures into comparison, in 1981 alone, 116,000 Peugeot 505s were built and 74,000 Citroën CXs. So you can see why the PSA group were not keen to keep on plugging on with this particular model. It doesn't make economic sense. And you think about the amount of work that went into producing this car, the designing, the developing, the prototyping, the creating the body stamps and the molds for the dashboard. It's just vast amounts of work which they almost certainly didn't get their money back on, which is rather sad really, isn't it? Now, this is a shame because as far as interesting rivals to the Granada go, it really is fascinating. It's comfortable, it's nice, you've got this trip computer with a bit of French writing on it. It's really quite cool. It's just a pity the buying public didn't agree. Part of the problem is, of course, the executive car market is all about cachet and a bit of swagger, dropping your key fob on the boardroom desk and seeing everyone go, oh, he's got one of those, has he? Talbot just weren't really known for big executive cars, so it wouldn't have had that kind of clout if you dropped your Talbot key fob Oh, you've got yourself a Solara. Isn't perhaps the reaction you're looking for when Bob from accounting has just got himself a new BMW? The styling on this thing really is interesting, and it grows on you the more time you spend with it. And the time I've been, just a couple of hours I've been with the car today, it's already really growing on me. The big lights with those huge wipers, the angle-topped vertical grille looks really cool, and those big tail lights are awesome as well. That was very much the style of the time, the 1980s. Suddenly you got big, square, oblong tail lights on everything. Mercedes, BMW, Fords, you name it, that was the look. Originally the plan for this car had been to have a vertical light on it, a narrow vertical light on the corners, but that, along with a few other styling things, was changed when Talbot was bought by Peugeot. Another major change was the engine, because originally they'd been struggling with a choice. They knew they could use the 2 litre, but didn't really want to because that wasn't very executive-y. So they were trying to find a 2.2, and they wanted the PRV but didn't think they'd get it because obviously it was going into the rivals. But once they were owned by PSA, getting hold of the V6 was no longer an issue. However, it didn't actually fit, so they had to lengthen the front of the car a little bit just to make it go in. Now, driving a car like this is kind of mixed emotions. On the one hand, quite exciting that this is the only one of its kind on the road over here. At the same time, sad for the same reasons, and also a little bit nervous. I mean, I'm not worried about driving anything, but just the thought that if I curbed a wheel or dented a wing, there aren't any other ones I can go to replace them, so gotta be careful with this thing. It's an unusual seating position, being so low in the car. It feels like halfway between a luxury car and a sports car. It almost feels like a GT, but a big saloon GT. Those dials are so clear, this dashboard is really easy to see and use, though I'm told that the writing, the labels do actually come off quite easily on all the big buttons. So you have to go back in with some Tipp-Ex and a biro to remind yourself after a few miles. From my point of view, I'm not upset it hasn't got an automatic. I don't really like driving autos very much at all. However, I know that the executive market is very much automatic dominated, so that will not have been a positive move, not giving it there. Well, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this ride out in this astonishingly rare Talbot. If you have, please as always please hit the like and subscribe buttons, and join me again next time driving something completely different.